Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Mussar Monday. We are currently in the middle of the 13 Principles of Faith as listed by Maimonides, Rambam. And last week we just started to discuss principle number 8, that we believe with perfect faith that the entire Torah that we now have is that which was given to Moses. And we went into great detail last week about the principle of every word that we have currently in our hands is the same Torah that has been given to Moshe at Mount Sinai and has gone down from Moses to Joshua to the elders to the prophets, all the way down to the men of the Great Assembly, and further beyond that, all the way to the hands that we have today. And if you have those pyramids that we gave out just a few minutes ago, and to all of our friends online, you're welcome to email me at Wolbe, AWOLBE, at torchweb, torchweb.org, and I will happily send you a copy of this and what's on the reverse side, the unbroken chain of Torah transmission by each generation, all the way from Moses and Mount Sinai, all the way to us here, the Torch Rabbis and Rebbitzins, and all of our fellow friends who come learn with us. The idea here is that every word of Torah needs to be sourced. You can't just make up rules. You can't just make up facts. Everything must be sourced. We see this in our Talmud class that we learn every Friday afternoon at 12 o'clock. We go into details of each word in the Talmud. There's no, I'm in the mood of saying it. I'm in the mood of, no, there's no such thing. Everything needs to be sourced and everything needs to be qualified appropriately. So last week we discussed, let's first do a quick review like we do at the beginning of every principle. First principle was that we believe that God is the creator and ruler of all things. He alone has made, does make, and will make everything. The second principle is that we believe with perfect faith that God is one, Hashem Echad. God is one and only one. And there is no unity that is in any way like His. Number 3 is that we believe in perfect faith that God does not have a body. Physical concepts do not apply to Hashem. Number 4 is that we believe with perfect faith that Hashem is first and Hashem is last. Hashem doesn't operate by time. Number 5 is that we believe with perfect faith that it is only proper to pray to Hashem. One may not pray to anyone or anything else. Number 6 is that we believe with perfect faith that all the words of the prophets are true. Number 7, we believe with perfect faith that the prophecy of Moses is absolutely true, and that he was the chief and master of all prophets, both before and after him. And now we're up to number 8, which is, I believe with perfect faith that the entire Torah that we now have is that which was given to Moses. So the Torah that we have today is the exact same Torah that was given back then at Mount Sinai. All right? This book of the Torah, no letters are added, no letters are omitted, nothing is changed from the Torah that was given to Moses at Mount Sinai. So now, every commandment given to Moses on Mount Sinai was given together with an explanation. And we've shared this principle last week and many other times prior, that the Torah tells you what to do, but not how to do. The Torah tells you what to do, not how to do. So, the mitzvah of mezuzah, we know that we have to put a mezuzah on the door, but it doesn't tell you what a mezuzah is. It tells you to put tefillin on your arm and on your head between your eyes, but it doesn't tell you what tefillin are. It doesn't either tell you all the details of how you put it on. What is it made out of? We have no details. We don't have any of the how. We have the what, not the how. And we can give about 611 other commandments that the Torah tells us what to do, but not how to do. So how do we know how to observe those mitzvos?
The oral law.
That's the oral transmission that was given from Moses and Mount Sinai all the way to us learning it here today. Right? There's a source for everything that's written in halacha. Halacha doesn't have the right. In the halacha, if you look in your purple section of your pyramid, you'll see that the purple section is the halacha. Halacha is based on the Talmud, which is based on the Mishnah, which is based on the Torah. So the Rambam doesn't have the right to just fabricate or make up laws just because he's in the mood. It needs to be sourced. And if you look in Maimonides, every single halacha is sourced in the Talmud. Everything in the Talmud is sourced in the Torah. So it needs to be sourced from a higher source. Okay. It says, "Come up." This is the Mishnah. The Talmud in Brachot says the following. Okay, it says, "Come up to me to the mountain, and I will give you the tablets of stone, the Torah, and instruction." What is the tablets of stone, the Torah, and instruction? What is that? Torah refers to the written Torah. The instruction is its interpretation. We are thus commanded to keep the Torah according to its interpretation. This interpretation is what we call the oral Torah. Okay? Torah Shabbal Peh. Moses wrote the whole Torah with his own hand shortly before he passed away. And we know that he gave a copy of each, he wrote 13 copies of the Torah, 12, one for each tribe, and the 13th one went into the ark. So wherever the Jewish people traveled, they had the ark with them, and the ark had the broken tablets, they had the new tablets, and they also had the Torah. They also had a Torah in there. Take the scroll, Moses said to the Levites, take this scroll of the Torah and place it by the side of the Ark of the Covenant. All right? So the commentary, the understanding, the explanation, I don't like the interpretation. The explanation of the Torah, however, was not written down, but was orally taught to the elders, Joshua and the rest of the Jews. Moses, therefore, said, all this word that I instruct you, you shall keep and obey. It is for this reason that it is called the oral Torah. Although the oral Torah was not written down, it was taught by Moses to his council, which was made up of 70 elders. Elazar, Pinchas, Joshua, thus all received the tradition from Moses. Joshua, however, was Moses' main disciple, and he was given responsibility for the oral Torah and received special instruction in it. There is a difference of, there are several opinions. If you look, the last 6 words of the Torah, Torah ends the following. Okay. We're in Deuteronomy, chapter 34, verse number 5. Vayamas Sham Moshe Eved Hashem. And so he died there, Moses did, the servant of Hashem, Be'eretz Moav, in the land of Moav, Al Pi Hashem, by the mouth of Hashem. All right? That's verse number 5. You have verse number 6 through verse number 12. 6 more verses till the end of the Torah. Who wrote it?
Joshua.
If Moses died before the end, who wrote those last 6 verses?
Joshua.
So there are two different opinions. There are 2 different opinions. Either it was Joshua, or it was Moses. Don't forget, Moses wrote about 2,244 years that were 2,400 and 2,400 years prior to his birth. So Moses clearly, with his prophecy, was able to write things that he did not actually experience, because he was told to write it by the word of Hashem. So he can write things that happen after his passing as well. Right? If we look over here, since Moses died at this point, the sages raised the question of who wrote this and the following verses. This is the Talmud in Baba Batra. Don't forget, no word in the Torah goes unaccounted for. So the Talmud immediately will discuss this, say, hey, who wrote it? If Moses is dead, you have another 6 verses we got problems with. There are 2 opinions. Moses wrote it up to this point and Joshua wrote the remaining verse. Or the Holy One, blessed, he dictated these words to Moses and he wrote them with tears in his eyes. That's what Rashi says. Okay? Now, why does it say that? Because Moses also, what's written over here is, if you read the following words of the next 6 verses, you see that Moses writes about how the Jewish people mourned him. For 30 days they mourned him. They cried for his passing. They were missing their leader. Moses is gone. So now, who do we have? We have Joshua. Now, it's very, very interesting that immediately. Okay, so I'm going to read to you just these few verses. It's only 6, right? Vayikvar oto begai be'eretz Moav, and Hashem buried him in the valley in the land of Moab, mul bet Peor, opposite bet Peor, v'lo yada ish et kvurato ad hayom hazeh. And not know did anyone his burial place to this day. So nobody knows where Moses is buried. U'Moshe ben 120 shana b'moso. Moses was the age of 120 years when he died. Lo koha sa'eno v'lo nos lecho. Not dimmed had his eyes, and not left him had his moistness. He didn't age. Moses didn't age. Vayifku bnei Yisrael et Moshe. And weep did the children of Israel for Moses be'arvos Moab, in the plains of Moab, shloshim yom, 30 days. Vayitmu yimei b'chi evel Moshe. And then they concluded the days of tearful mourning for Moses. V'Yeshua benun malei ruach chachma ki samach Moshe es yado alav. Joshua the son of Nun was filled with the spirit of wisdom because Moses laid his hands upon him. Vayishmu elav bnei Yisrael v'yasu kasher tziva Hashem es Moshe. Therefore they listened to him, the children of Israel did, and therefore they did as Hashem commanded to Moses. V'lo kam navi od b'Yisrael. Listen, important to this. Never has there arisen a prophet again in Israel like Moses. Asher yoda'o Hashem panim el panim. Whom Hashem knew him face to face. There's no one to date, no one ever will be, no one before, no one after Moshe who will be as great as Moshe. No one who will see Hashem, who will be able to know Hashem face to face. It doesn't say that you will see Hashem because Hashem doesn't have a face. So what does it mean that Moses was like he was able to communicate face to face? What's the difference between seeing someone from the back and seeing someone from the front? When you see someone from the back, you can tell who they are, but you can't tell their expression. You don't know what's going on in their face. You can follow their silhouette. You can follow their, walk behind them. But you won't necessarily know their expression unless you see their face. When you see their face, you see their detail. You see their expression. You see if they're happy, if they're sad, if they're angry, if they're tired. You're able to see all of that. Moses, it's not that he saw the face of Hashem. Hashem doesn't have a face. But Moses saw the clarity of Hashem to the point where it was like he saw the face of Hashem. And what this verse is telling us is that no one will be able to attain such a level where they're able to see with such clarity. Okay? So, l'chol ha'otot v'hamoftim asher shlacho Hashem la'asot be'eretz Mitzrayim l'faro u'l'chol avadav u'l'chol artzo. And as evidenced by all the signs and wonders that Hashem sent him to perform in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh and against all his servants and against all his land. V'lachol hayad hachazaka, and by all the hand that was strong. V'lachol hamora gadol, and by all the awesome deeds that were great. Asher asa Moshe le'nei bnei Yisrael, that Moses performed before the eyes of all of Israel. And that's the end of the Torah. So Moses here is departing from the Jewish people and declaring things that don't seem so humble. Talking about it, how great he is, talking about how his miracles were the greatest miracles, right? No one will ever see God as clearly as he did, right? Moses was a humble man, right? Now, there's a fundamental principle that we talk about, that knowing your qualities doesn't make you arrogant. Quite the opposite. Not knowing your qualities makes you ignorant. Right? A person must know their character. A person must know what they're good at, what they're not good at. Their strengths and their weaknesses. Every person must spend time figuring out what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses. And if a person does not spend that time, then they'll be very ignorant in their own character. It's a very dangerous thing. But now that someone knows what their qualities are, it's not enough to just know your qualities. You also have to know that it's a gift. So if you are very, very smart, what's your responsibility? Your responsibility is not to show off how smart you are, but rather your responsibility is to use your mind and to remember it's a gift from Hashem. If God made you a very talented musician, guess what? Your job is not to show off and brag about how talented you are, but it's rather to feel a burden or a responsibility to use it appropriately. Know that you have it, and make sure you don't waste it. Make sure you don't waste it on nothing, on getting pride and taking credit for yourself. It's a very important thing. My grandfather would say it's a terrible thing if someone doesn't know their flaws. A terrible thing. But if you don't know your qualities, oy vavoy is what they would say in Hebrew. Woe unto you if you don't know your qualities. A person must know their qualities. We're very easy at bashing ourselves. Oh, I'm so terrible, I'm so bad, I'm so this, I'm so that. What's about how good you are? You have to know how good you are. Because if you don't know your strengths, if you don't know your qualities, you'll never be able to become a better person. Because you need to use those qualities to maximize who you are. Moses wasn't comfortable. If Moses wrote this and not Joshua, according to that opinion, Moses was uncomfortable with this. He has to share his greatness and write about it. Hashem told him to, so he will. You know, it also says in the Torah that Moshe was the most humble of all men. That's very humble. Right? You want to know who's the most humble of all men? I am. But that's humble. No, that sounds ridiculous. So again, knowing that you have a talent, knowing that you have a skill, is not arrogance. It's responsibility. You are responsible to know what your qualities are. You're responsible to know what you're good at and what gifts God gave you. And if you don't know what they are, you're at risk of losing them. So a child, my grandfather would say, a child who speaks the truth, when they could have very easily lied. So it's important for the parents and for the child to note this child has the trait of emet. This child has the trait of emet, of truth, and as such it needs to be fostered, it needs to be developed. A child who lies senselessly for no reason, perhaps they're flawed with the negative trait of falsehood, of lying. It needs to be paid attention to, because if someone does not pay attention to it, they're going to live their whole lives with lies. If someone can live their entire life without paying attention to their qualities, it's a very devastating thing for a person to live their lives blind. That's what Mussar study is, and that's what we try to focus on in all of our classes, to focus on opening up our eyes to the things, the skills, the talents, the flaws that we possess and perhaps don't pay attention to. So, we continue. Joshua likewise taught this tradition orally as long as he lived. There were then many elders who received the tradition from Joshua. Rabbi Yehuda the prince, was known as our holy rabbi, and it was our holy rabbi who wrote the Mishnah. From the time of Moses until our holy rabbi, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, who was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, there was no book from which the oral Torah could be taught publicly. In every generation, however, a prophet or the head of the Sanhedrin would write down his notes, his own notes, in order that he might remember what he learned from his teachers. He would then use those notes in his oral teachings. Everyone listening would also take notes according to his ability. So when you look here at the back of this sheet and you see all of these lists, they weren't memorizing it till Rabbeinu HaKadosh came around and wrote the Mishnah. Everyone wrote notes. They took notes. And what Rabbeinu HaKadosh did was Rabbeinu HaKadosh collected all those notes and put together what we know as the Mishnah. Similar notes were taken on laws that were not transmitted from generation to generation, but were derived through the 13 principles, where they were used to expound the Torah and agreed upon by the Sanhedrin. So you needed to have approval of a Sanhedrin. That's a court of 71 sages. Now go find 71 rabbis who will agree on anything. Right?
Find two.
Find two, exactly. Right, you know the story with the island.
You get two rabbis, you get three opinions.
There you go. That's right. You know they say about when they were doing the first peace accord between Shamir and I believe it was either I don't remember who the president was. They said, you know what, they discussed it and they said, you know what, we're going to go back to our people and he's going to have to go back to his Congress. And Shamir goes, he says, oh, for you it's very easy, you just go to your Congress. He says, for me, every cab driver is a prime minister. Right? Yes.
You were talking about saying Moses, there was no prophet like him before or will be after. Now, what category would we say Mashiach when he comes? What is he a prophet, not a prophet, or, I mean, how does he fall into that category?
I think that we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see.
Wait and see?
Yeah. The reason is, I'll tell you, it's a good question. It's a good question, but we try to stay focused on, Mashiach will deal with when Mashiach comes. We can't live every day today. What's going to be. We have to live our lives, follow the mitzvahs, and try to help bring Mashiach. What's going to be his status and who he is and what's going to be, that we leave. There are other people, let them argue about that. Let them discuss that. So we'll talk about. I'll do some research and get back to you on that. It's a good question.
Thank you.
All right. So any other questions before we continue? This continued until the time of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. He then gathered all the traditions, laws, explanations, and commentaries on the entire Torah, which had been handed down from Moses and expounded by the Sanhedrin in each generation. This was then all compiled into the books we know as the Mishnah. So if you look here on the turquoise part, we have over here the Mishnah, we have the 6 orders of the Mishnah. Okay? And if you have a copy there, are there any extra copies? Anybody have an extra copy? You have one? Okay, great. So we have the 6 orders of the Mishnah. We have Zraim, which is seeds. On the right side, you see. We have Moed, which is holiday. Nashim, which is women. Nezikin, which is damages. Kodshim, which is holiness. And Taharot, which is purity. These are the 6 categories. Each of these have, Zraim has 11 tractates. Each tractate has many, many chapters, right? So you have the Moed, which is 12 tractates, 7, 10, 11, 12. So 11, 12, 7, 10, 11, 12 are the amount of the 63 different tractates we have in the Mishnah, divided into 6 main categories. So you pick a category, you pick a topic, it's in one of those 6 categories. Right? Marriage, divorce, oaths, vows, a ketubah, being betrothed. All of that is in women's issues. You talk about Shabbat, all the holidays, whether it be Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Chanukah, Purim, Pesach. They're all in Shavuot, all in Moed. Then you have seeds, which is all agricultural laws of blessings. That's all in Zraim. Then you have Nizikin, which is damages. Damages is any type of damage, monetary, all the courts, all the laws of all of those different topics of tort, civil and criminal laws are all in damages. In Kodshim, you have offerings and dietary laws. And then Taharot, purity, you have temple, spiritual, and family laws. So I like to ask this question whenever we discuss this. So Pirkei Avot, ethics of our fathers, is one of these Mishnayot. It's one of the Mishnahs, one of the tractates. In which of these 6 categories would you put Tractate Avot? In which one?
Boy, there's so much in there.
Avot is about character. It's about being a better person.
So 6.
So most people will say, like you said, either 5 or 6, either holiness or purity.
4.
But we know that our sages, in their infinite wisdom, in their divine wisdom, placed it in nizikin, in damages. What does damages have to do with character? Our sages explained. A person who doesn't have proper character, a person who doesn't work on becoming a better person, will cause the people around them a lot of damage, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. People who have a bad temper, people who are impatient, people who can't control their jealousy, people, whatever it is, any negative trait, it's damaging. It's damaging to themselves, it's damaging to those around them. So that's why our sages put the tractate of Avot specifically in Nizikin. Okay? So, the Mishnah was then publicly taught to the sages and revealed to all the Jews. Everyone wrote it down and it was spread to every community. The oral Torah was thus preserved and not forgotten. Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda the Prince, the reason why he wrote the Mishnah is because he felt that it got to a point that if he does not write it down, this oral tradition, getting from all those notebooks of all the Sanhedrin and all the laws and all the customs and all of the different opinions, if he wasn't going to write it down, it was going to be forgotten. He had to write it down. The reason why Rabbeinu HaKadosh broke the tradition of leaving the oral Torah unwritten, it was oral till then, now you're writing it down, was because he saw that the number of students were declining, new troubles continually arising, and the Roman Empire spreading throughout the world and constantly becoming stronger. The Jews were also becoming separated, traveling to the four corners of the globe. Right? Today we have Jews everywhere. We have Jews in Alaska, Jews in Mexico, Jews in Peru, Jews in Argentina, Jews in South Africa, Jews in Australia, Jews in Russia, Jews in China, Jews in Ukraine, and Jews in Bolivia, and Jews in what, Liechtenstein, right? And Jews wherever you can imagine. There are Jews even in France. Right? You have Jews everywhere. So because of that, he therefore wrote a single volume that everyone could have. It was something that could be learned rapidly and not forgotten. Rabbeinu HaKadosh spent all his life together with his council, publicly teaching the Mishnah. Among the sages who were part of Rabbeinu HaKadosh's council were Rav Chia, Rav, and Bar Kapara, Rabbi Yochanan, and Rav Hoshea. Besides these, there were tens of thousands of other sages who received the tradition from Rabbeinu HaKadosh. So it was what? Well, we just have the. What do you mean?
Those names, they're here. It's 120 CE, but I don't see it. Because Yehuda Hanasi is here.
Right, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. That's it. He is the author of the Mishnah.
I don't want your naming though. It's okay.
Well, you have Rav, you have Shmuel, you have Rabbi Yochanan, you have many different channels that they went through. Besides these were tens of thousands. Okay, Rav then wrote the Sifra and Sifri commentaries on Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy to explain and expound upon the main points of the Mishnah. Rav Chia wrote the Tosefta to elucidate other concepts of the Mishnah. Rav Hoshea and Bar Kapara likewise wrote Braisos to explain the words of the Mishnah. Finally, Rabbi Yochanan wrote the Jerusalem Talmud in the land of Israel, some 300 years after the destruction of the Holy Temple. Okay? So now, if you look on our sheet here, you'll see that we have many of the commentaries of the Midrash, right? The Mechilta, the Sifra, the Sifri, the Midrash Rabbah, the Tanchuma, right? These were all, and then we also have the teachings of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who shows up here, okay, on the other side. These are all teachings that were extracted from and connected to the Mishnah. Now, there's a common thing I hear many, many, many times. People say, "Oh, Rabbi, where does it say that?" I'm like, "What? It says it in the Midrash." It's just Midrash. It's just Midrash. Midrash is not Torah. Midrash is just a bunch of rabbis telling stories. No. God forbid, we can't say that. Midrash is Torah just like Mishnah is Torah. Midrash is Torah just like Talmud is Torah. The fear I have is when I hear that, is that perhaps those people who don't believe in Midrash being divine don't believe either in the Mishnah or Talmud being divine. And that's a very big problem.
What is Gemara?
Gemara is Talmud. Gemara is Aramaic for Talmud. It's the same word. Yes.
And here where it says Kabbalah, now doesn't the Kabbalah come from the Zohar?
Yeah, it says it over here. Shimon Bar Yochai.
Where?
The left side. Now down. Here we go. Down. Here we go.
It's like Palmer.
But it doesn't say.
Well, that's what he wrote. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. That's what he wrote.
Oh, he wrote the Zohar.
Yeah. Right up there. We have the Zohar. Right up there on top shelf. Shelf number 1.
The red.
Yeah.
I thought Zohar was written by Rabbi Isaac Luria.
No. We'll talk about that. But that's there's other writings that were explaining the Zohar. Okay. All right. Ravina and Rav Ashi were the last of the sages of the Talmud. It was Rav Ashi who wrote the Babylonian Talmud in Babylon, approximately 100 years after Rabbi Yochanan had written the Jerusalem Talmud. Both Talmuds, or Gemaras, were commentaries on the Mishnah, explaining its depth and expounding on all the new concepts that had been resolved in the courts since the time of Rabbeinu HaKadosh. The two Talmuds, the Tosefta, the Sifra, and Sifri, all explain what is permitted and forbidden, clean and unclean, liable and innocent, fit and unfit. It was all as it has been handed down from generation to generation, and ultimately from Moses himself. So if you look over here, we have over here the beautiful Don Levitt Library, Don Levitt Family Library. We have over here many shelves of the Babylonian Talmud, and this is the elucidated translation from Art Scroll, an amazing Schottenstein edition. And basically it has the full text of the Talmud as written by Ravina and Rav Ashi. And on the other side you have in English an explanation of that entire Talmud, because it's written in Aramaic. And unless you're a skilled yeshiva student who's been studying ancient Aramaic texts for 10, 20 years, it's very hard to read it.
Is Mishnah also written in Aramaic?
Some of it is and some of it isn't. But it's more like Hebrew than it is Aramaic. But the Talmud is straight Aramaic. So if it's important to learn it, that's why we have the Talmud Lunch and Learn every Friday at 12 o'clock, right here at the Torch Center, Lunch and Learn. Right? Wisdom is free, lunch isn't. Right? So, it's okay. If you can't, we'll sponsor your lunch. It's no big deal. Just come learn Talmud. It's worth it. So, it's important to know that every step of the way here, every single step goes back to the top, to Moses at Mount Sinai. You know, the sages say that all of the Torah, all of the Talmud, all of the Mishnah, all of the Toseftas and the Braisas, and the Midrash, and the Mishnah, everything that's written in the Torah itself, in the 5 books of Moses, all of it could be learned from just the 10 Commandments. All of it could be learned from the 10 Commandments. And all of the 10 Commandments could be learned from the first of the 10 Commandments. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God. And all of that first commandment can be learned from the first letter, Aleph. Everything. Why? What is the purpose of all of Torah? The purpose of all of Torah is to give us an uninterrupted and unadulterated connection with the Almighty. So we can have a relationship with God through His mitzvahs. Every mitzvah that we have is an opportunity to become close to Hashem. So when we do a mitzvah, when we learn the Torah, it all has one purpose: to bring us closer to Hashem. So of course, if we have a clear relationship with Hashem, the Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God, of course we can derive all Torah from it. Abraham, Avram Avinu. Did Avram Avinu have a Torah? No, Avram Avinu didn't have a Torah. So how did he know? It says that Avram observed all the Torah. How did he know the Torah if he didn't have it? Well, he had a very clear relationship with God. If you have the relationship with God, we learned this last week. Yisrael ve'oraita v'kudsha brichu chadhu. The Jewish people, the Torah, and Hashem are all one. We're all united as one. So if you have a clarity of Hashem, you have all of His Torah clear as well. It's all baked in it, in the relationship. Avram Avinu, Abraham, our patriarch, had such a clarity of God. He didn't only introduce monotheism to the world. He followed the way of Hashem. What it meant to be someone who emulates God. That's what he brought into this world. And Abraham was the father of our nation. Abraham was able to reveal the Torah through his knowledge of Hashem. All he had was knowledge of Hashem, and that's it he needed. Ravina and Ravashi were therefore the last great Jewish sages to transcribe the oral Torah. Every Jew therefore follows the Babylonian Talmud. This is because every single Jew had agreed to accept the teachings of the Talmud, for it included the teachings of all our sages, or at least the majority of them. They, in turn, had received the tradition regarding the foundations of the Torah from generation to generation, and ultimately from Moses himself. So we see, it's not enough for the rabbis, Ravina and Ravashi, to just write a Talmud based on hypotheticals, theoreticals, ideas, thoughts. No. It had to be sourced in the Mishnah, which had to be sourced in the Tanakh, and which obviously is sourced in the Ten Commandments. So everything has to go up, and we'll see shortly that it's critically important to understand how this next step comes about. What comes after the discussion of the Talmud? There is a disagreement. One opinion says like this, one opinion says like that. So something amazing we find in the Talmud. We don't almost ever, we never see compromise. One opinion says it should be 10 amot, the other opinion says it should be 5 amot. Let's do it in the middle, 7.5. Let's just compromise. No. It's either one is right or the other is right. No, that's not either right. They're both right, but which one do we follow? They both could have biblical sources, but there's one that we follow. And that's important to know, and that's what the Rambam goes through the conclusions of every discussion of Talmud. That is, again, based in the Mishnah, based in the Tanakh. And then the Rambam comes with, what's the bottom line? Tell me what to do. Right? Many times people will call me and say, Rabbi, I got a question, a halachic question, tell me what to do, what's the right thing to do? Right? Most of the times, they don't care the source. Just tell me what to do. That's why the Rambam wrote it. The Rambam wrote law because people weren't necessarily interested in going, you know what, let's learn the whole Talmud together. Let's come to the conclusion after we study the whole Talmud. And then we'll know what to do. Just give it to me. Just tell it to me straight. Tell me what to do. That's what the Rambam did. The Rambam collected all of the conclusions of all of the discussions and compiled what we have here on the bottom, the Yad HaChazakah. What is the Yad? Everybody remember what a Yad is? Yad is a hand. Right? Yad is a hand. What is the numerology? The numerical value of the word Yad? Yud is 10 and Daled is 4. Okay, so we have Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Daled. Okay, so it's 4. Let's continue. Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yud. So we have Yud is 10 and Daled is 4. It's 14. The Rambam wrote a book called the Yad HaChazakah, the strong hand. Like we see, the strong hand, it's also the end of the Torah. Remember the verse that we read before, at the end of the Torah, right by Moses' passing. But also, over here, it mentions the Yad HaChazakah, the last verse. And by all the hand that was strong, and by all the awesome deeds that were great, that were performed by Moses before the eyes of all of Israel. Strong hand. Strong hand. That's what Maimonides wrote. He wrote the Yad HaChazakah, 14. You know why it's 14? Because the numerical value. But take your hand for a second, go like this, if you can. All right, and let's do this together. Okay, so we take one bone, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. You have 14 bones in your hand. Right? It's not a coincidence. But Rambam wrote 14 different books in the Yad HaChazakah. And the 14 books are the following categories of Jewish law. Hamada, which is knowledge. Ahava, it's all on the bottom of your sheet. On the bottom, in the purple outline. Ahava, which is love, which involves love of God, prayer, tzitzit, tefillin, mitzvot, many of the commandments that portray our love of Hashem. Zmanim, which is times, Shabbat and Jewish holidays. Nashim, women, marriage, divorce, infidelity. Kedusha, holiness, which includes sexuality, nidah, family purity, incest and adultery, conversion and the laws of kosher. Hafla'ah, separation, which is vows, oaths, Nazarites, and donations to the temples. Ra'im, seeds, which is agricultural laws. Gifts to the poor, priests, tithes, secondary tithes, first fruits, Shemitah, the sabbatical year of the land. Avodah is the 8th category, which is divine service, laws of the temple in Jerusalem. We have the korbanot, the offerings, laws for offerings in the temple, accepting those of the whole community. Tahara, cleanliness, ritual purity. Nizikin, injuries, criminal and tort law. Kinyan, acquisitions, marketplace laws. Mishpatim, rights, which is civil law. And Shoftim, laws relating to legislators, Sanhedrin, kings, judges, Noahide, and the Messianic times. These are the 14 different categories Rambam writes in his Mishneh Torah, the Yad HaChazakah. And Rambam says that if you just learn his books of the Yad HaChazakah, the 14 books of the Mishneh Torah, you don't need to learn anything else in Judaism. You have it all.
Where's the Guide of the Perplexed?
Well, that's a different book that Maimonides wrote, dealing with a lot of the challenges they were facing in that generation with heresy and a lot of the philosophy that was going on in that generation, and Rambam was addressing that particularly. But it's interesting that Rambam says all you need is my book, and you got all of the Torah. Everything is in there. Ironically, there is no book in all of Judaism that has more commentaries trying to figure out what he's saying than the writings of the Rambam. You have more commentaries arguing on every word of Rambam than you do on almost any book in Jewish literature. You have thousands of books, commentary on the Torah, and on the Mishnah, and on the Talmud. But on Rambam, you have more than all of them together. Just read my book and you'll know it all, right? After you study all of those other commentaries, you might know it all. But there are 3 in the category of those who deny the Torah. And they are a person who says that the Torah does not come from God, even if he only says that with respect to one verse or even one word in the Torah, that's not God. God wouldn't write that. That's considered someone who denies the Torah. If a person says that Moses wrote it on his own, then he denies the Torah. The same is true with one who denies its interpretation as included in the oral Torah. So we've got to be very careful here. Rambam warns us that someone who denies the truth of the oral Torah is as if he's denying the truth of the Torah, period. Such a person is then like the Tzaduk and the Baitus, people who are the heretics who denied the oral Torah. The Sanhedrin, the great court in Jerusalem, is the basis of the oral Torah. It stood as the pillar of law, and from it laws and judgments emanated to all Israel. So when they had a challenge, it would come to the Sanhedrin. Much like today in American law, lahavdil elef alfei avdolot, not to compare holy and unholy. But when they have an argument in different courts, eventually it will make its way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court makes a ruling, and that's it, the case is over. You can't fight the Supreme Court. You couldn't fight the Sanhedrin either. The Torah assures us of this court's authority, right? When it says, you shall abide by the Torah according to how they teach it to you. This in itself is a commandment of the Torah. Everyone who believes in the Torah must therefore accept the court's authority and depend on it regarding all matters concerning our religion. That does not mean, contrary to other religions, that you can't ask questions. You can ask questions. In other religions, you ask questions, chop, chop, you're done. Like literally, chop, chop. In Judaism, you're encouraged to ask questions. One who does not believe in the oral Torah is counted as a heretic, as an apikoros. And one who openly denies the authenticity of the oral Torah, he is in the same category of all other heretics, people who deny that the Torah came from heaven. They're part of the informers and the renegades. All of those are not counted as believing Jews. Right?
What happened?
But now the Reform movement, they don't they believe? You know what I'm talking about?
I don't believe in orthodoxy. I told you this.
I
don't
that.
believe in reform. I don't believe in conservative reconstructionist. I don't believe in any of it. I believe there are two types of Jews. There's a growing Jew and a stagnant Jew. My hope is to be among those who are the growing Jews, and that everyone who comes to Torch classes be among the growing Jews, and that everyone in Houston come learn Torah and become part of the growing and not the stagnant party of Jews. And the hope is that there aren't any stagnant Jews, and that we're all growing and taking steps in our own. Yes, there are people who have certain confusions and certain ideas in all parts of the spectrum. People have different ideas. Some are accurate, some are inaccurate, some are completely inaccurate, some are completely accurate, and so on and so forth. But we have to be very, very careful. No, we really have to be very, very careful not to put, because I'll tell you, most people, you ask them today, do you believe that God gave the Torah to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai? I believe that most Jews today will say yes, notwithstanding their affiliation or membership. So, although the movements may have certain opinions, I don't think that that's what the majority of people today. I think the movements is like sort of like, how do you vote? You're a Democrat, Republican. I'm a registered independent. I'm a registered this. I'm a registered that. You know what? It doesn't make a difference. At the end of the day, we're all Jews, and we all need to cleave to being as close to Hashem as possible. Cleave to Hashem, to become as close as possible to the Almighty. That's what we strive for. And when we read this Ani Ma'amin now from the beginning, right? Ani Ma'amin be'emunah shlema, I believe with the perfect faith. Shekol haTorah hamutzuya ata b'yadenu. The entire Torah that is now in our hands, the oral Torah, the Mishnah, the Midrash, the Talmud, every part of the Torah, Hi hanituna l'Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom, is that which was given to Moses of blessed memory. It's the same Torah. So you say, oh well, that's oral Torah. What do you mean? Oral Torah was given to Moses as well. Anybody walk into a synagogue and see people wearing tefillin? Yes, right? We all walk to the synagogue, we see people wearing tefillin. Okay, so you decide, you know what? It's time for me to take my tefillin and put them on as well and join the minyan. So we put on our tefillin, and we have our tefillin are decorated in pink with beautiful flowers, and we walk into synagogue with our pink tefillin, and everyone's going to start looking at me like, what's wrong with you? Don't you know that tefillin are not supposed to be pink? They're supposed to be black, right? And what are we going to say? Oh, well, show it to me in the Torah. And they're going to be, well, it doesn't say it in the Torah. It doesn't. It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that tefillin need to be black. It does say it in the oral Torah. It was a law that was given to Moshe at Mount Sinai. We all know it's black. We all know that it needs to be black. Where does it say it? We do believe in the oral Torah. And again, we have 613 commandments. We can dice up every single one and find the true believer within ourselves, that we see that the Torah was given with all its details to Moshe at Mount Sinai. The Jewish people, how are they going to know how to slaughter an animal? 40 years later, when they're in the land of Israel, they'll figure out how to slaughter an animal properly. Moses had to show it to them right there. Does it say it in the Torah how to slaughter an animal kosherly? No. It was oral Torah. Everybody took notes. Everybody took notes. It was confirmed by the Sanhedrin, passed on to the next generation. And the next generation had their discussions. The Sanhedrin did the same thing. The court, it was brought to the court. They confirmed it, passed it on to the next generation. So the Torah that we have today in our hands, right here, generation 130 to generation 131, the discussion we had here today is all sourced all the way back to Moses and Mount Sinai. We have so much to be proud of, that we have an original document known as the Torah, given to us by the Almighty, so that we can cherish it, use it, and connect to Him through it. Thank you all so much for coming, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you.